If last week's conversation on compassion for idiots wasn't challenging enough, we continue today with compassion for healthcare workers and first responders. It is my hope that we add to our previous discussion in a positive way. Like I said last week, I will ask you to be prepared to listen with open ears, to try to keep an open heart and mind, and to take notes so that we can continue our discussion of our different points of views at a later time. Let's change for the better together. See, when we look at how we can have compassion for individuals in these careers, we must first define compassion for this conversation. The definition I will use is from the Greater Good magazine at Berkeley, which says, compassion literally means to suffer together. Among emotion researchers, it is defined as the feeling that arises when you are confronted with another suffering and feel motivated to relieve that suffering. Have you ever wondered how nurses are suffering? How about how police officers are suffering? When I selected to preach on this topic in March, it seemed like a great decision. There was a pandemic sweeping the nation, and law enforcement and healthcare workers were at the top of the thank you list. People were being so compassionate for their efforts day in and day out to keep us safe. But I have to tell you, I would not, never, ever have picked this topic had I known or had any inclination that there would be a call for police reform when this sermon was supposed to be presented. But here we are. I wrote more drafts of this sermon than anything else I had ever written. That's saying a lot, considering I went to school for journalism. I worked as a journalist, and I'm almost done with my second master's. I write a lot, like a lot. But never have I wrote this much. In preparation for this sermon, I realized I had to make a choice. A choice to say what needs to be said versus what wants to be heard. A choice to be brave or to play it safe. I chose to say what needs to be said. Not to rub anyone the wrong way, but to give everything I've got to potentially change the perception of just one person. I chose to be honest. I tried to add some videos and some lighthearted feel, to be a little funny, trying to be transparent, in hopes that sharing my story could be the key to having a little more compassion for the people in the most difficult of career fields. I made a mistake at work today. We all do it. But what if I said that and I was a doctor? Or a police officer? When a plumber gets it badly wrong, he leaves you with a flooded kitchen. When a doctor gets it badly wrong, he leaves you dead or crippled for life. And when a cop gets it wrong, he leaves you dead, in prison, or convicted for life. In 2011, the effects from the recession were still present. And the only person I knew who had made it out of the recession financially strong was my dad. He worked in corrections for over 35 years. As a kid, I hated my dad's job. I could never go home with him. I could never go with him for Take Your Child to Work Day. He missed a portion of every single holiday. He could never be a class chaperone on my field trips. But here the recession was, and he was getting a promotion. I changed my career from journalism to law enforcement on the heels of this recession. My brother also went into law enforcement around the same time. One of my best friends became a registered nurse and decided to start working for a travel nursing company. And the other one was already a registered nurse and became a post-op nurse for plastic surgery. So how can I, with all these positive and negative ties to this topic, present you an unbiased sermon, you ask? Easy. I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to take you on a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. I'm going to lean on the facts. And if you're willing to listen, you may learn something new. And if you learn something new, you may think about this whole thing a lot differently. Understand, I did not want to become a cop. This was not my childhood dream. I did not love cop shows. I did not get bullied and yearn for a position of power. This was not a family career either. My dad fell into corrections very similar to me. Prior to that, he played football for the World Football League. I know, not what you were expecting, right? Well, most of this generation is the same way. Law enforcement after the recent recession became the backup to the backup job, and it's a simple slideshow that I'm going to show is going to explain to you why. As you can see on this slide, a high school diploma that you get at 18 years old, which costs you nothing, will allow you the opportunity to become a law enforcement officer. A bachelor's degree that will cost you anywhere up from $60,000 will give you no guarantee to a job. The Law Enforcement Academy, you can enter at 19 years old. It'll take you about 6 to 9 months to finish, and you'll have a job guarantee. It only costs you about $3,000 to $5,000. After you become a police officer in that same year, you can make anywhere up from $40,000. So we know why people are going into law enforcement. Let's talk about some shortcomings of law enforcement, like training specifically in Florida. This next slide is going to ask you a question that I want you to answer in the chat. In Florida, who is required to complete more hours of training, a police officer or a barber? Please take a second and type your answer into the chat. If you answered barber, you are correct. Barbers are mandated to complete 1,200 hours of training, while law enforcement here in the state of Florida is only required to complete 770 hours. This breaks down to 6 months full-time or 9 months part-time in the police academy. I also included some links that'll be on the next slide, just in case you want to look into it further as we look for ways to improve this system. Nursing, on the other hand, takes a minimum of 1 to 4 years, depending on if you're going for an LPN diploma, an APN, or a BSN degree. To become a doctor takes anywhere from 10 to 14 years, start to finish. To become a lawyer takes a minimum of 7 years, and to become a surgeon takes anywhere from 11 to 16 years. Now I know what you're thinking. It's no way that a cop, after 6 short months, can have the power over all these people in all these other career fields. I will give you one better, my friends. Consider this: that same cop at 19 enforces laws that they may not even have the knowledge to comprehend. Considering that the lawyers who wrote the laws went to law school and they were in school for a minimum of 7 years, and the people enforcing those laws only have a high school diploma. It's crazy, right? Trust me, I know. But have you ever considered this? Did you even know this prior to now? Because this is what you gotta know to affect change. You have to understand this stuff to make the other stuff make sense. And only then, when we suffer together, being compassionate for others, can we impact true change. I love a good conspiracy theory, so I'll share one with you. Now that you know this information, what do you think the motivation for this low standard of training is? I got a few ideas. Mainly circulating around getting uneducated people to do your dirty work. I wasn't trying to go there, but if you're thinking like me right now, I'm wondering if this was all a part of a bigger plan to seem like cops on the outside but be used as gatekeepers on the inside to keep others in their place. All orchestrated by those who created this system to systematically discriminate against certain people, abuse certain people, eliminate opportunities for certain people, just maybe. And if this is true, who is to blame for it all? According to the proceedings of National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America, police violence is a leading cause of death for young men in the United States. Over the life course, about 1 in every 1,000 black men can expect to be killed by police. There are no true stats on how many people die per year from police interactions. You will see some private companies that claim to be researchers put numbers out there, but again, question those companies and their motivations. You will also see a lot of comparison between our police violence and other countries' lower amounts of police violence. Again, question everything. Let me explain. Other countries suffered from school shootings long before we had. In the wake of these events, they immediately changed their policies, and today, it is very difficult to obtain a gun in other countries. Even those who go through the process of obtaining a gun may not have the option to legally carry one on their person. Because of the strict gun laws, the crime trends in other countries are significantly different than the crime trends here. It is more likely that other countries would have a knife fight than a shooting. This in turn has of course made the countries less violent and statistically safer. Yet to compare America, a very much so pro-gun country, to a country that has a large amount of violence and violent crimes, to another country who rarely ever sees these type of crimes, it's kind of unreasonable. When these stats are shown, it's a ploy to confuse you by taking the statistics out of context and showing you numbers but not giving you the reasoning behind them so you fully understand the big picture. See, 1 in every 10 hospital patients is harmed by a medical error. On average, a minimum of 70,000 people die every year as a result of a doctor's mistakes. Some statistics I found showed over 1,000 deaths, over 100,000 deaths a year. I know, the crazier just keeps getting crazy. And this number is errors. This isn't even like a general death toll. This is just mistakes that are being made in the medical field. Yet, we feel so differently about these numbers. They are lives, and they matter. But there is no comparison in the amounts. We lose more lives to medical negligence than law enforcement by a long shot. I hate to tell you this, but we got a world of reform to do. Now to the racism in law enforcement. Racism can easily be integrated into the system for multiple reasons. There's officer discretion, entering the field at a very young age and having maybe a racist upbringing coupled with limited life experience outside of it. Even class discrimination based off of preferential treatment for different socioeconomic levels. In the medical field, racism is harder to pin down, but it still happens. Recent reports from the Center of American Progress have shown that the fact that the United States has the highest maternal and infant mortality rates among comparable developed countries is not bad enough. The survival rates for African American mothers and their infants are even more dismal. African American women across the income spectrum and from all walks of life are dying from preventable pregnancy-related complications at 3 to 4 times the rate of non-Hispanic white women, while the death rate for black infants is twice that of the infants born to non-Hispanic white mothers. Why? Perception. It is being reported that doctors across the United States are not being as responsive to mothers of color and their complaints while pregnant as they are to pregnant white women. So before we move forward, let's pause and agree on some universal truths. There is prevalent racism in the world. There is changes that should have been made in law enforcement, both on the street and in corrections. There is changes that need to be made in healthcare. But before we decide on those changes, let's be compassionate to those in the field, doing the impossible day in and day out. Let's suffer together before we blame. Let's come up with solutions to progress forward. Isn't it? That part when she said, "I rather it be my fault than no one's fault." Man, it is so true. This is from conditioning. See, we feel like we have to place blame to identify what a specific person did, and that it is that person's fault for doing it, and now we can come up with multiple ways to fix it, what this person just messed up. But we can't control it. Not somebody else, not life, not nothing. Only thing we are in control of is ourselves. Another great point from the video was blame equals discomfort and pain. We can add this to our universal truths list. So before we blame, we need to be able to be compassionate and suffer together. Then we need to work on ways to alleviate the discomfort and pain we are feeling without placing blame. Am I a cop asking you to not be mad at the police? No. No, I'm asking you, how are you putting your anger to good use? I'm asking, how are things you're doing going to hold police accountable? I'm asking you, if you are for police reform, like I am, what tangible changes are you asking for? Because where I live does not afford me the opportunity to say, I want to defund the police. It's already not enough police in the hood. Now departments begin to get defunded, officers reduced. Where do you think the resources left over will be pulled to? You're not going to put them in the ghettos. They're not going to put them in the hoods. This, when I think about it, it may not be a benefit to people who look like me at all. But I know this. I have suffered together with my community. I'm compassionate about changing my community and continuing these conversations as we search for strategies that will help our community change for the better. We know people in these careers do impossible jobs. We know they make mistakes that result in people's deaths. We know that there is racism in both systems. Now let's discuss why we should be more compassionate towards them. A 2013 study published by the National Institutes of Health found the average life expectancy of a police officer to be 57 years old, almost 22 years younger than the general population. Here's a video that highlights the suffering of officers in a way you might not expect.
55.
According to an ABC News article, 228 current or former officers died by suicide in 2019, and 178 in 2018. More officers are killing themselves than other people are, meaning an officer's greatest threat today may be themselves. So why be compassionate to these people in these unbearable careers? Because they are people. They are perfectly imperfect. We sometimes hate it, but we need them. We criticize because we care. We protest because we want change, but we still have work to do. We have to learn more. We have to seek out the knowledge keepers in the field, because if we know better, we can do better. But not if we are not being compassionate. Nurses and doctors and healthcare professionals see horrible things just like police. People just like them a little bit more. But what these people in these career fields experience day in and day out changes them. It's not normal. It is things nobody should see. As we realize this, we begin to suffer together. with them not just in uniform, but person to person, spirit to spirit. There are not many things in my life I would change. For the most part, I am satisfied with the decisions that have brought me here. But if I could do it all again, if I could just have a redo, I would leave the cop part out. To unsee things that I was not made to see. To unfeel things I was not made to feel. To not be aware of all of the horrible things in this world that you don't know about. I would give it all back if I could, because although it is now a part of me, it is far from the best part of me. These are far from my best memories, far from the best years of my life. And I am just hoping that in the end, it was worth it. That the sacrifices I have made and the risks that I have taken will be able to help change the system. That in the end, we could find a way for this world to just be fair, to be a community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. We may not have much at the moment, but we have life. And that means we have a chance to start again. In time, a change is bound to come. It has to.